I'm Mr. Kane.
Hi.
Hi. And as we get to certain parts, certainly I'll zoom in and all that kind of stuff. Josh, you want to kill the light switch next to you so that we can see things just a little bit better? Bless you. All right, so first part we got right here, and this is where we're going to kind of start with the notes. And notice you got some lines to kind of fill in here. Common weakness in writing. By no means going that you are a weak writer, and this isn't a speech that is reserved only for English 10 students or anything like that. You know, this could be going for Honors 11, AP, seniors, and all that kind of stuff. A common weakness in writing is an overall lack of varied sentences, meaning sentence structure, sentence length. Becoming aware of the three main types of sentences, and this is when you would start to fill stuff in, is going to be simple, compound, and complex. Being aware of these can certainly help you vary the sentences in your writing. I'm your English teacher. Writing's important to me. I know a lot of folks are going to go, well, writing's really not going to be all that bad because, yeah, I'm not going to do your job. I don't plan on being an English teacher. Probably the case for most of you. And again, I know this doesn't apply to everyone, if you are looking for college, you plan on going college, post-high school, you're going to be writing a lot. I don't care what you're doing. If you're looking in biology, engineering, you're going to be writing. If you're looking into like psychology, you're going to do a boatload of writing. So most things, yeah, marketing, and even math, which you think of as being like the anti-writing, there's still a lot of writing that's going to take place so far as like proofs and things that you have to do, explanations and all that stuff. So it certainly is an important skill. If you're not going that route, it still helps because you need to be able to think of an idea, you need to be able to articulate it, and you need to be able to communicate it. So if you're going workforce, you're still certainly going to be using a good bit. So do pay attention with that. So two things that I try to focus on throughout the course of the year, focusing on your word choice, coming up with the best word, and then also the way that you're going to present it, coming up with the best sentences. So the most effective writing uses a variety of sentence types, and the way this is going to go is we're going to break down into the simplest and kind of go from there. So the very first one we're looking at is going to be a simple sentence. So simple sentence has the most basic elements that make it a sentence. We got a subject, we have a verb, and we have a completed thought. All right? And we'll get into some examples here in a moment. Not to insult intelligence. What's the subject? I like how you shrug it and then you raise your hand.
The thing that the sentence is about.
Yeah, I'd say generally what the sentence is going to be about. Nick, anything to add on to that? Bless you. Bless you.
It's typically a noun. Thank you.
Yes. And so when we talk about noun, it could be person, place, thing, animal, thought, all that kind of stuff. Verb, action that's going to be taking place, might not always necessarily be an action. And then completed thought, essentially that this is going to make sense. A lot of folks will have something where we got a subject, we got a verb, but the one that we tend to struggle with sometimes is going to be a complete thought. So here's a variety of examples of sentences, and yes, I do want you to write them down. We'll get into a specific reason why. So first sentence, number 1, Joe waited for the train. I got a subject in Joe. I have a verb in that he waited. I know exactly what he waited for. He waited for the train. So it's a simple sentence because it only really has those three things. I got a subject, I got a verb, I got a complete thought. If, say I shorten my sentence. We always pick on Austin, so we'll pick on Marissa. Say my sentence was Joe waited. Would that be a complete sentence? You think yes or no? Like all I wrote, Joe waited, period. No? What do you think? Joe waited. No. Yes. Ooh, I like this conflict. What do you think? would it be a complete sentence if it was just Joe waited?
Does it have to be a completed thought to be a complete sentence?
It would be a complete sentence.
Wait, but is it it's not a complete thought? So is it?
It is still a complete thought. This goes into more detail because we know what he waited for, and Austin get to you here in a second. But if I went Joe waited, I have a subject and I have a predicate. I got the verb.
So like it would just depend on what the subject and the verb is for it to be a complete sentence.
Oh, well, it could be, and I'm not saying this is the way that you want to go about doing your, what did you do today? I walked. That's a complete sentence.
So it would just depend.
Yeah. What did Joe do today? Joe waited. Now, and so Kat's right. Joe waited would be a complete sentence. And Hayden, you're asking about complete thought, right? Okay, that would still be a complete thought because I know what Joe did. If I had Joe waited for, period, now I do not have a complete sentence because the word for is forcing me to have more to that thought, and at that point I'm left empty. So by adding one word, I could take a complete sentence and make it incomplete. If I had Joe waited for the, also not going to be a complete sentence because I don't know what I'm waiting for, but the word for made it mandatory to include that bit of information. This is not going that I want you to write an essay with complete two-word sentences the whole way through because it's not going to go anywhere. So it kind of depends upon what that thought was, or is intended to be, I guess would be the answer.
Will you usually have an article after word for?
You are yes. And so what you have here is what's called a preposition.
Yeah.
So so there's kind of like a rule of thumb that you should never end a sentence with a preposition. I would just about say that all grammatical rules will have some kind of exception that will be built in, but more often than not, yes, you should have something coming after the word for. And I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there are instances. Do you have any pets? What do you have?
Cat.
Okay. Hayden has a cat that he is supposed to care for. Most would agree that that's a complete sentence, complete thought. Some would argue grammatically that it should be Hayden has a cat for which he should care, that the wording of it should be switched. It's kind of arbitrary a little bit with it. Number 2, the train was late. Still got a subject, the train. I still have a verb, was. It's going to link it with late. So number 2, complete sentence. Take a look what's starting to happen, though, with number 3. 1 and 2 are pretty similar. Number 3, Mary and Samantha took the bus. Now what I have is a compound subject. I got 2 subjects, but they're both doing the same thing. They took the bus. It's a simple sentence. Marissa, my verb is took. If I had Mary and Samantha took, period, would that one be a complete sentence? No, because took requires more information to come after it. So, like, Austin, when you were saying it could depend upon the verb, this would be a perfect example of that. Technically, the word was is a verb. It's a linking verb. Austin was. Assuming you're still alive, that wouldn't work as a complete sentence. Even if you weren't alive, it still wouldn't work as a complete sentence. I need this back. Because I'm sure you've realized how important my pens are to my outfit. It's not for use, it's for looks.
I know.
So,
Looks good.
number 4, still a simple sentence. I looked for Mary and Samantha at the bus station. It's still simple in the sense that I have a subject, I have a verb looked, I have a complete thought. I looked for Mary and Samantha. That would be a complete sentence. But I got that preposition that Hayden was talking about at the bus station. This doesn't make this complex. This doesn't make a compound. It's still a simple sentence. Number 5 is the one where folks kind of go, wait, what? Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station early, but waited until noon for the bus. I got a compound subject, Mary and Samantha. I also have a compound verb, arrived and waited. So they are doing 2 things. They arrived and they had to wait until noon. I have 5 sentences of varying length they would all still be considered a simple sentence. Last night, being the adequate parent that I am, I read with my 8-year-old daughter before bed. And we're reading Junie B. Jones books. Austin, you're probably not familiar with Junie B. Jones. It tends to be more female. Do you remember Junie B. Jones? I can't stand these books. Did you read Geronimo Stilton? I can't stand those books either. Geronimo Stilton. He was like was he a mouse? Was he a mouse? Some little animal thing.
Oh, yeah.
What I don't like about Junie B. Jones books, what I don't like about Geronimo Stilton books is it tends to be the same sentences over and over and over again. So they're very repetitive. Alright? So this isn't to say you're only going to use the same kind of sentences over and over. But you can get a variety of sentence length. So if you are, the see Spot run, see Jane chase Spot, see Spot come home, all your sentences are going to be of that length. It gets kind of repetitive. But to say, if we go, you need to write a simple sentence, it doesn't mean that it has to be simplistic. There's a word in this sentence that a lot of people, and it's been a while since maybe you've talked about these, so it might not be jumping out to you. There's a word in this sentence that makes people go, wait a minute, there's no way this can be a simple sentence because of the use of that word.
But.
And the word is but, okay? Because it is a conjunction. However, this is still a simple sentence because after the word but, I do have a verb in waited. What do I not have after the word but? I don't have another subject. So it's still one sentence. Some of you are comma, punctuation paranoid. That you always punctuate stuff is what I kind of think of. So if Shy comes across the word but, she might feel like she has to put a comma there all the time. And that is not always the case.
When I text and I text sentences like that, and I'd be like, but I put a comma.
So if you do not have homework due tomorrow,
Awesome.
but don't forget about Friday's vocab list. No comma would be needed because I did not add another subject to it. And we'll go into some examples as to when you would, so you can kind of see the contrast with it.
If you put comma there, then the other half would just be a weighted until moving to the
I'm sorry. If you put a comma, what? No, what?
Never mind.
You sure? If I added the word Shy, and since you said you're punctuation paranoid, if I added the word they between but and waited, I've added a subject.
Yeah,
Then I would need the comma. So, sometimes just adding a word or taking a word away can make all the difference. Same thing happens for a lot of people with because. You see because and you feel like I need to put a comma there. Most of the time you don't. If you take out but and you have a sentence left, right, yes. So that could be the test. Copy the word or cover the word but, even though it shows up on my hand. Waited until noon for the bus, not a complete sentence, not a complete thought, no punctuation necessary.
comma before, like after early. Why?
No.
Why?
Because the only time that, if say we put the word they there, that comma would go before but anyway. So it's comma, conjunction, then that next sentence. But because what's left is not a complete sentence, I don't need that comma. So, the use of compound subjects, compound verbs, prepositional phrases such as at the bus station, and other elements can help lengthen a simple sentence. They can help vary it. They can help make it more interesting. But simple sentences often are short. This one gets a comma with but, because I have a subject in simple sentences, and then I have a verb with are. The use of too many simple sentences can have the effect where the writing kind of becomes a little bit choppy, and it sounds like you're talking to a 4-year-old. And that's not meant to insult any of you for the writing, but it's trying to make you more aware of it so that you know when to kind of switch it. You write like a 4-year-old?
My handwriting.
Yeah, my handwriting.
Well, the good thing is your essays mostly are typed, so handwriting won't be an issue. But I can't say all of them, though, because as you do things like with Keystone, those are handwritten free response questions, which we'd have to take a look at. All right. So just to kind of clarify, and really Kat was kind of getting towards this when she talked about if you took out the word but. A simple sentence can also be referred to as what's called an independent clause. It's referred to as an independent because while it might be part of a lengthier sentence like a compound or complex sentence, it also can stand by itself as a complete sentence. So if you have a sentence that has an independent clause, that means embedded within that sentence you have a sentence that could stand alone on itself.
So if you were to put a comma there, that's, comma spaced, right?
If we for but
Yeah, if you put it there without putting the word there after it.
technically it would not be a comma splice.
What is it?
Comma splice. There's two things that kind of get confused. There's a comma splice and a run-on sentence. I'll show you an example of a comma splice coming up.
Well,
Okay.
It might be a run-on if there's a comma there.
It wouldn't be. So a run-on sentence should have punctuation that's missing. A comma splice usually has a comma, but it doesn't have like a conjunction to keep it together. So knowing that I got more sentences coming, I'll give you an example of which one's going to be a comma or a
So if you put
run-on.
a comma there, but you didn't have the word but.
If they were there, that would be a comma splice then. If you use a lot of simple sentences in an essay, consider revising some of them into compound or complex, which we're going to get into, and honestly, I'm going to kind of make you do anyway, so we'll know about it. Compound sentence, all right? This is a sentence that is made up of two independent clauses or complete sentences, and they're connected to one another with what is called a coordinating conjunction. The word but would be one of those. So coordinating junctions are easy to remember if you think of the two words fanboys, and you might have heard this before. Fanboys. Fanboys,
Or
fanboys.
and, nor, but, or yet, set.
Yep, which we have right over here. So, the fanboys are going to be, as Max was saying, for and nor, but, or yet so. These are considered coordinating conjunctions. Doesn't mean every time they get used that you would have a comma, because we'll kind of get into how you're able to tell about that, but it means those are coordinating conjunctions. The word on there that you would probably right now use least often as a coordinating conjunction, my guess is it would be for. You might use the word for a lot, like she waited for the bus. Most people don't use it as a coordinating conjunction. I'll explain a little bit when you would. Because it can be a really good word and a useful one for the essays that we're going to be working on. All right, so here are some examples. So number one, Joe waited for the train, but the train was late. So we're still looking at the same type of sentences that we had with the simple one. So if I go from Joe to train and I put a period there, that would be a complete sentence. Joe waited for the train. If I had the train was late, that would be a complete sentence. So if I'm going to join together two independent clauses, I have to have a comma and a conjunction. Hayden, you were asking about comma splice was the first one? A comma splice would be Joe waited for the train, comma, the train was late. A run-on sentence could be Joe waited for the train, but the train was late, and there's not a comma there. Okay? So comma splice, I'm joining two independent clauses, but I'm only using a comma. Run-on sentence, I have two parts of a sentence. It's not always going to be independent clauses, but I have two parts that are joined together, but there's not a comma where there should be one. I looked for Mary and Samantha at the bus station, but they arrived at the station before noon and left on the bus before I arrived. Compound sentence, I looked for Mary and Samantha to bus station would be an independent clause. They arrived down to before I arrived, independent clause. Notice, I have the word but right here with the comma because it's linking together. I have the word and is a coordinating conjunction, fanboys. I do not have a comma because it's not linking two complete thoughts together. Because after the word and, left on the bus before I arrived is not a complete sentence or thought. A lengthy sentence is considered a compound sentence. Joining two sentences together, combining. Number 3, Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon, and they left on the bus before I arrived. Mary and Samantha left on the bus before I arrived, so I did not see them at the bus station. Say I flipped number 4. So my first words are I did not see them. Okay? I'm going to start off with I did not see them at the bus station. I want my sentence to end with Mary and Samantha left on the bus before I arrived. What would be a coordinating conjunction that I could use at that point? Well, a lot of folks would go with the word because, but technically it's not going to be a coordinating conjunction because it's not on fan voice. So if there's one of those, I'm glad you said because, there's a coordinating conjunction that basically replaces the word because. Not a coordinating conjunction because fan voice. The S is so. I did not see them at the bus station, for Mary and Samantha left on the bus before I arrived. The word for is a replacement for the word because. A lot of times people end up relying on because as a go-to word, and then Zach ends up using it 4 sentences in a row. The word for, F-O-R, can replace it when you have a compound sentence. So for is a good one to know. Now, like since, because, those are very good words, but they're ones that are going to get used with a complex sentence, which we'll get into. Hey, you need me to slide it up at all for you? Okay. You all right if I go on the next slide? Okay. So coordinating conjunctions are useful when you're trying to connect sentences, but sometimes, a lot of times, compound sentences are going to get overused. Coordinating conjunctions can indicate some type of relationship between 2 independent clauses in sentences, but they don't always indicate how much of a relationship is there. The sentence that really takes care of that business for us are going to be complex sentences, and those are the ones that we tend to, I don't want to say we use most often, but those are the ones that I really try to drive home as something for you to use. So you're moving on to, I think we're on page 3 at this point. Oops. So the word "and," for example, adds one independent clause to another, but it doesn't indicate how those two parts are related. So a lot of compound sentences that use "and," or, so, but, those are the most common ones, can kind of weaken the writing. Clearer, more specific relationships can be established through the use of complex sentences. Yocasta committed suicide, and, comma, and Oedipus blinded himself. That's a fine sentence because I'm mentioning these two parts, but "and" doesn't really indicate the relationship. Yocasta committed suicide. So would work a little bit better. Therefore, as a result, Oedipus blinded himself. That's where you start to get more of a relationship taking place. So is better than "and" most of the time. But the problem then becomes people start to rely on the word "so" or the word "because" kind of all the time. So, complex sentence. All right, this is made up of an independent clause. Slide this out a little bit. And one or more dependent clauses that connect to it. Dependent clause. It's similar to an independent clause or a complete sentence, but it lacks one of those elements that would make it a complete sentence. Essentially, it's not a complete thought. Dependent clause and phrase is where things are going to get a little confusing, and we'll try to, smooth that out probably more so tomorrow. So complex sentence, independent clause, and at least one, maybe more dependent clauses are connected to it. It doesn't use coordinating conjunctions. It uses what's called subordinating conjunctions, which we'll get into. So here is an example of dependent clauses. They're not capitalized, and they don't have a period there because they are not complete sentences. Because Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon. Not a complete thought.
Can you go back to the last slide?
Yeah. Let me run through these and then I'll go back. While he waited at the bus station, after they left on the bus, none of those are necessarily going to be complete thoughts. So they're what we call dependent clauses. So, oops. Oh, wait, before that one?
Yeah. Alright.
You good? So, dependent clauses such as those can't stand alone as a sentence because they can be added to an independent clause to form a complex sentence. Dependent clauses, so you're on the page where now you got a whole bunch of little blanks. Dependent clauses begin with what's called a subordinating conjunction. These are not all of the subordinating conjunctions. I'll give you a list of some more later on, especially when we're doing essays because it gives you options. But these are things that would count as a subordinating conjunction. So they're in alphabetical order, yeah, all the way through. After, although, as, because, before, even though, if, since, though, unless, until, when, whenever, whereas, wherever, while. If you start a sentence with one of those words, it should be a complex sentence. While I was in English class, period, is not a complete sentence. Because we need to know what happened while you were in English class. After I left English class, not a complete sentence, because I need to know what happened after you left. Hannah, when did you see Tyler fight Bill in the hallway? If she were to say, after I left English class, that might be an answer, but it wouldn't be a complete sentence. Hannah, when did you see Austin fall off the stairs? After I left English class, might suffice as an answer, not a complete sentence. Hayden, when did you decide you don't like English class? After I read Oedipus Rex. While an answer, not a complete sentence, you know, at that point. But these are really good words because they highlight relationships between multiple parts. So, complex sentence joins an independent clause with one or more dependent clauses, which we also said. The dependent clauses can go first in the sentence, followed by the independent clause, as in the following sentences that we have here. So, take note, this is where things really kind of become a little hectic. Because Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon, I did not see them at the bus station. While we waited at the train station, Joe realized that the train was late. After they left on the bus, Mary and Samantha realized that Joe was waiting at the train station. What do I have in the middle? What do I have in the middle, punctuation-wise, for all of those things? What do I have in the middle of the sentence, punctuation-wise, for those three that are up there? Which you would put in all of your sentences, probably. Punctuation-wise, what's in the middle at number 1? For 1, 2, and 3, all of these have commas. This is not a comma splice, Hayden, because while he waited at the bus station is not a complete sentence. It's not a complete thought. After they left on the bus, not a complete thought. Because Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon, not a complete thought. If you start your sentence with a dependent clause, you have to have a comma separating the dependent and the independent clause. So when that dependent clause comes first, a comma should be used to separate those two sentences. If I wrote, after they left on the bus, Mary and Samantha realized that Joe was waiting at the train station, and I did not have a comma, that would be considered a run-on sentence. I need to have that comma. But if you flip it, and I end up having the independent clause coming first, I don't need a comma. So these would be an example if you have an independent clause followed by a dependent clause. Shai, this is when I think you would probably throw a comma in if you get punctuation paranoid. I did not see them at the bus station because Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon. That sentence is grammatically correct. Just because the word because is there does not mean a comma is needed. I bet 90% of people would. I don't mean 90% in this room. I think 90% of people. Joe realized that the train was late while he waited at the train station. Mary and Samantha realized that Joe was waiting at the train station after they left on the bus. None of those sentences get commas. But if you flipped it like we did on the previous slide, you would have to have a comma. So if you're going dependent clause plus independent clause, comma necessary. If you're going independent clause followed by dependent clause, comma not necessary. That's where it gets a little weird. Tomorrow we're going to finish these things up, and then we're going to do some practice stuff with it, so you try to become more comfortable with it. But you'll have situations where I'm going to go, all right, you need a compound sentence here, you need a simple sentence here, you need a complex. We're trying to get you comfortable and pretty fluid with them so that you know what's going on. Don't hurt yourself. Read one. Tyler, you didn't plug in any phones today to leave, right?